What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller from Hook'emHeadlines.com coming back at y'all today with about 2 weeks worth of spring football notes and recaps, nuggets, things like that, as well as kind of a look at just the first half of spring ball. We've kind of already hit the halfway mark if you're just looking at the spring football practice schedule. Texas has roughly a half dozen practices remaining at this point before the orange-white spring football game on April 15th at DKR. So, kind of moving into the latter stages now of camp, but definitely still plenty to talk about. We'll have a weekly show here with Tarek and Shane here before too long, but there's quite a bit that I wanted to unpack myself here before we hit another weekend of what could be a scrimmage for the Longhorns, either Friday or Saturday. But yeah, I wanted to start off the video with last weekend's open scrimmage, some of the notes I had from that, some of the standouts as well. We did an article on the site talking about 3 standouts from that scrimmage. I also have a 4th that I would like to add since the writing of that article here a couple of days ago. But there's a couple honorable mentions I'll go through as well for the open scrimmage last weekend. But yeah, let's go ahead and get right into it. The first name I wanted to mention, and this is one that if y'all, if y'all followed Texas pretty close, you might have heard. But Arch Manning, he played pretty well. I believe probably only second to Quinn Ewers in terms of how impressive he looked, commanding one of the offenses during the scrimmage. By my understanding, and this is probably one of the bigger nuggets coming out of it, is that that Arch took the bulk of the second team reps, actually surpassing Malik Murphy. It sounded like Arch was holding up pretty well under pressure, that he was making more consistent throws, and that he was getting some nice timing and anticipation on his deep ball. A lot of air under him too. I believe he had connected with, it was either Xavier Worthy or Jonte Cook for one of those deep balls on Saturday. But yeah, I mean, again, seeing Arch kind of retaking that second team spot in the scrimmage last weekend, I don't believe he's consistently taken second team reps this week, but I will check that to confirm, and we'll continue to keep an eye on that. But yeah, I mean, the fact that he was able to look more consistent than Malik while also taking back that second team spot that we talked about it on the show on the site last week. Malik was getting the second team reps after he was making his spring debut, made his debut in practice right in the first practice after spring break. But yeah, it sounds like Arch had a nice scrimmage and continues to do some nice things. Move over to the defensive side of the ball for another one of the honorable mentions I wanted to give, and that's Colton Vasek, another true freshman. The edge rusher, it sounded like he was one of the more disruptive pass rushers during the scrimmage on Saturday. One of the things it sounds like took place on Saturday was the defensive line and the edge players winning the bulk of the battles in the trenches. Sounds like guys like Colton Vasek, Justice Finkley, and Barron Sorrell were winning a lot of the battles off the edge. Vasek was starting to use his length a little bit better and utilize that more for leverage and his ability to get to the passer, get more in simulated pass rush situations. Obviously, you don't have a lot of contact on the quarterback right now, but yeah, this was one of the better days that I've heard so far for Vasek, and it's nice to hear his progressions in this regard because we've heard more about Ethan Burke this week as well. We'll get more into that here in a little bit, but all told, good to hear about Vasek's progress. If he keeps making noise and has days like this in practice, showing that he can be an impact pass rusher, that's going to be his ticket to getting on the field and getting some key early playing time this fall. So let's go ahead and move into the 4 guys that I was most impressed by and that I heard were standouts from the scrimmage on Saturday. The first of which is Devondre Sweat, the super senior defensive lineman, has really looked the part along with Byron Murphy, is one of the best defensive players that Texas has returning this season, or for this coming season. Heard this a lot, that there aren't many returning players for the Longhorns that were bigger to get back and not declare for the NFL draft than Sweat. The one play that sounds like Sweat really stood out on was play where he got a lot of pressure up the middle. I believe that was on Quinn Ewers. a nice interior pass rush, and he was able to get his hands up and bat a ball, but then actually came down with it for an interception. It's one of the more athletic plays that we've heard about so far this spring. Sights of Alfred Collins during the 2020 Alamo Bowl against Colorado when he made that insane play. But we tweeted out I tweeted out today on the page that Sweat actually was tied for the most batted balls among any Power 5 interior defensive lineman. He had 5 last season, and so being able to get in these passing lanes and really disrupt the passer is nothing new to him. Getting his hands up and at least getting a fingertip on the ball, whatever, to knock it off its route. But actually coming down with an interception is really impressive, obviously. But it wasn't just that play. Sounds like he was one of the stewards of really pushing for the interior pass rush. It sounds like on guys like Quinn and Arch and Malik that there was pass rush coming up the middle on them all day long. Again, namely from guys like Sweat and Murphy. Those were the 2 names we heard that were being the most disruptive, which is not a huge surprise given that they're the 2 most experienced and experienced and proven returning defensive linemen this year for Texas. Another name that sounds like the coaches, the players really came away impressed by from this spring scrimmage is CJ Baxter. I've mentioned a lot of the early enrollees so far, but Baxter, I definitely heard the most about him of any of the running backs, or really even any of the true freshmen during this scrimmage. Vashik did hear some good things about, again, Arch, but Baxter really made a lot out of nothing occasionally on the ground. Again, I mentioned that the defensive line and the edge players were winning most of the battles in the trenches, and so sounds like Baxter had some chunk plays, some nice reads. He's hitting the hole really well, which again is something that really stuck out on his highlight tape coming out of high school, so nothing too surprising there. But I mentioned this in an article I'd done earlier this week, separate of the scrimmage standouts, was it sounds like his anticipation for blocking and his route running, and just the way that he's looked in one-on-one drills when he's running routes, something that looks better than as advertised when he arrived on the 40 acres here a couple of months ago. So it's really nice to hear that those parts of his game are already, could already be blossoming much earlier than I would have anticipated. But again, the way Baxter's looking right now, he's I believe he's getting the third team practice reps, but the way he's looking right now, really proving to, fit that mold of the bell cow running back for this offense. It's only going to continue to make a positive impact and leave a positive impression on guys like Deshard Choice and Steve Sarkisian. So he's continuing to make his case to get more and more reps this fall. And then the biggest name, I would say, that we heard about that made a really big impression and really stood out during the scrimmage in multiple ways is Quinn Ewers. I mentioned earlier that Arch was a guy that stood out during the open scrimmage and open practice on Saturday, but it sounds like Quinn held up really well in the face of pressure, that he was making some nice consistent throws and reads. 2 touchdown passes. We heard about a nice 70-yard ball to Xavier Worthy. We've actually heard a lot more about the deep ball connection between Worthy and Ewers here in the last couple of weeks, which is obviously really, really nice to hear. That's something that we're always going to be keeping an eye on, especially given some of the struggles between them 2 down the stretch last season. But, another nice read. It sounds like he had a couple nice reads in the red zone, including a red zone touchdown to Jordan Whittington. That type of red zone anticipation on routes, again, I get that this is not like full contact drills or anything, but even simulated pressure, we're hearing more about positive reads from Ewers in those critical situations on things like third down or red zone situations where, we weren't hearing as much about that last year in the spring or the fall in camp for that matter. So, it all goes back to this seemingly improving maturity that Quinn Ewers is bringing to the table as, one of the real leaders for this offense now. This is the year he needs to step up, and it sounds like he really is. Again, another solid week of practice for him as well. So it wasn't just like this scrimmage was a one-off. So yeah, again, good to hear good things from Quinn. The last name that I did want to bring up that, not only did we hear good things about coming out of the scrimmage, but just in general, this is a guy that has seemingly made a lot of plays and, is starting to show more in practice than he did maybe at the outset. Again, happens to be another true freshman. Looking back at the defensive now, that's Anthony Hill. I through the first week or two of spring ball, didn't hear a ton about Hill. Really since the end of spring break here a couple of weeks ago, we've started to hear more and more positive stuff about the way that Hill's getting integrated in with the defense, his understanding of the defense, and where he can make plays and be a difference maker. Sounds like, again, bringing some real pop in the pads to the table, showing off a little bit more versatility in the scrimmage as well throughout portions of early this week, and during the open scrimmage, heard a bit more noise from him. That's about all I've got from the scrimmage. Again, while it was a really important scrimmage for Texas to look good during and to really show out, and because it was in the midst of junior day, so you had guys like Colin Simmons, like Selman Bridges, some key blue chips, 5 stars watching while they were on campus visiting for junior day as well. You also had the coaches clinic. You had a guy like Kyle Shanahan, a lot of other high school coaches in town as well. Again, good to hear from some of those standouts there, because some of those are really key guys that are going to make an impact on both sides of the ball this fall. But yeah, I wanted to talk about more specifically some impressive true freshmen and some guys that are showing some real improvement as well, specifically some underclassmen here in the first half of spring ball for most improved players that we've heard about, but kind of give you an idea there. The first name that really comes to mind in terms of true freshmen that have impressed and that have really stepped up in the first half of spring ball, DeAndre Moore. I didn't mention his name among the standouts from the scrimmage, but it sounds like he had a couple nice catches. Mainly his technical ability, his hands, and just his consistency in practice are what's making him such a common name when when there's anyone in and around the program asked about standouts this spring, especially among the true freshmen. Heard a lot of good things about Jonte Cook as well, but Moore is the guy I think that has really surprised me, to a greater degree than anyone else on the offensive side of the ball among the early enrollees, because Jonte Cook had high expectations. CJ Baxter, Arch Manning, all these guys are 5 stars that had really high expectations. Whereas DeAndre Moore, he was the last receiver in the class among the 3 receivers that Texas signed. He was actually the lowest rated in the 247 Sports Composite. So, really surpassing expectations so far. And I've really heard nothing but good things about Moore so far this spring. Another true freshman that's really stood out, and I gave him a shout earlier, but no reason not to give him a shout again, and that's CJ Baxter. Yeah, I mean, again, CJ Baxter definitely had high expectations when he arrived on campus a couple of months ago. He got right down to work. He had an opportunity to get some extra attention. Coaches from strength staff, from the upperclassmen, during the winter strength and conditioning program, because you still had guys like Jaden Blue and Jonathan Brooks that were limited. Jaden Blue, I believe it was an upper body injury that he was getting back from, and then Jonathan Brooks' hernia surgery that he had a couple of months ago after the bowl game. And so, Baxter is a guy that's really been really opportune so far. Again, I really mentioned how he was a major standout during the scrimmage last weekend, and just continuously steps up to the occasion. So he definitely is one that has made an impact, and left a really positive impression on the coaches and his teammates so far this spring. I'll get into another name later in the running back room, but I've been very positively surprised by the running backs this spring. There were some question marks at the position, obviously, when you lose 2 guys the stature of Bijan Robinson and Rashawn Johnson to the NFL draft. There's going to be question marks, and so I think in terms of where Texas is sitting right now at running back, I'm pretty happy. The last of the true freshmen that I wanted to give a shout out to from kind of how they showed out during the first half of spring is Jaden Chapman. The offensive tackle, he's the highest rated of the signees along the offensive line for Texas in the 2023 class. So he arrived, at least for me, on the 40 acres with the highest expectations. He started out getting the third team reps at offensive tackle. Peyton Kirkland was actually getting the second team reps ahead of Chapman, but in the last couple of weeks, heard a lot more positive things about Chapman than any of the other true freshman offensive linemen. Two of the things that have stood out that I've heard about, versatility for one. He really does have the most polished game. The most well-rounded in terms of his ability to set the edge in run blocking and get some bodies moved off the edge, as well as just really holding his own in pass pro. He's definitely the most impact ready offensive lineman. Again, in the last couple of weeks, his talent, his ability is starting to come to the forefront. There are two names I wanted to mention among some players that have really improved on each side of the ball. One, upperclassman, although he's not the most experienced guy in the world either. He's still got multiple years of eligibility left. But there's two guys on offense, one on defense. But we'll start on the offense. I mentioned a second ago when I was talking about C.J. Baxter, there's another running back, that is technically a new addition to the running back room that has stood out this spring, and that's Savion Red. The former slot receiver was converted before the spring to running back, and he hasn't gotten a whole lot of like really high level practice reps this spring, meaning that I don't think he's really ever been with the first or second team on a consistent basis. He's actually been fighting below some of the some walk-ons, guys like Kai Woods, but he's taken advantage of every opportunity he has gotten, and he's earned praise from Jashard Choice and his teammates on multiple occasions at this point. We have covered it that side. I've talked about it in past videos, but that kind of multiplicity and just Swiss Army knife ability that Savion Red's going to bring to the offense this fall. He was a good wide receiver. He's good in the open field. He played quarterback, was more of a rushing quarterback in high school, had a year of over 1,000 rushing yards, and I believe it was over a dozen rushing scores, I do believe. So, a lot to like with the impact he's made on the running back room so far this spring. I think he's brought more competition to the table, especially with a guy like Keelan Robinson that's dealing with I think it's a groin injury that's still limiting him in practice. Granted, he's starting to work his way back, but Savion Red's been able to kind of bring that type of presence that you get from a guy that you can motion out or that poses a threat in the receiving game as well as on the ground. And I post this on the site too, but another underrated quality to his game, he's a good blocker. He was actually the second highest graded wide receiver last year for Texas and one of the 10 highest graded in the Big 12 in run blocking. And so he's not afraid to get down and dirty in that regard either. So again, a lot of good things from Savion Red so far. The other offensive player that I want to give a shout to, this is actually a newer name that we did an article on the site today about this, but talking about Cain. It sounds like Cain's actually had a better connection with Chris Jackson than I anticipated to blossom right away. And, it sounds like Chris Jackson in a few respects is a lot of what Cain needed, to really be a competitive force at boundary receiver. Texas is stocked this offseason at boundary receiver. You got guys like A.D. Mitchell, Isaiah Nayor, who's working his way back from injury. Cain's going to face a lot of competition at the boundary spot this offseason to get reps and to get a spot on the two deep. But, in terms of his route running ability, and just a lot of his fundamentals, hands were a question at times last year for him. But, again, from a technical perspective, it sounds like Chris Jackson's really bringing him along. And, this week in practice specifically, he's been a hot name. So, good to hear from Cain, just because, I believe A.D. Mitchell has actually taken away a lot of the first team reps at the boundary now. And so, Cain still bring that competitiveness and, still bring that fight. And, while Texas is working Nayor back from knee injury that he suffered last year, it's nice to have a guy like Cain that's got some of the game experience, had a big Alamo Bowl, over 100 receiving yards. So, we'll continue to monitor his progress, but it's good to see that he's making strides around the midway point of spring. And then the last name, this is, again, moving to the defensive side of the ball, looking at linebacker, is junior Mo Blackwell. Blackwell, I believe he's been getting the first team reps at Sam linebacker, at least when, in game type situations, in practice or during the open scrimmage, he's been the first team Sam linebacker. I do anticipate he's going to be the projected starter at that spot heading into the fall. It sounds like Blackwell's put on about 5 or 10 pounds, but it sounds like he's playing like he put on 10 or 15. Just in the sense that his tackling ability has progressed, his play diagnosing ability as well, his timing and feel, especially as in pass rushing situations. That sounds like he is getting it a little bit more this year. He never really played one position full time during his first couple of years on the 40, and so. Maybe another year in the system playing a consistent role. Most of his reps down the stretch last season were at Sam linebacker. So, this is exciting to hear that, he's really kind of finding his way and finding his role in the defense. But, lastly for him, when the situation calls for it or when Texas is going through these sorts of drills in practice, Blackwell's been contesting space pretty well. He's someone that you can trust to drop back into pass coverage because he's got that safety background, and he's definitely fast enough to cover that space in the open field. But just, again, it's that timing and instinct combined with the physical tools that will allow him to contest space so well and let that come to the forefront in the Big 12 this fall. And so, Blackwell is a name that I wanted to mention on the defensive side of the ball just because I think he's one of the big winners on that side of the ball so far this spring. That's, quite a few names to go through that have stuck out in multiple ways for Texas, whether it be the open scrimmage last weekend or it's just in general looking good in practice and drills in the last couple of weeks and spring break let out. So it sounds like this program's really headed in the right direction. Sark has a lot of optimism when speaking about this team, and it just feels like there's more depth and talent in the mix, and it's being proven every single day in practice that proving that this program is headed in the right direction. But anyway, for Andrew Miller at Hook'emHeadlines.com, that is pretty much it. Hook 'em.